your task more efficiently. And but the task was kind of set earlier, when earlier work kind of demonstrated that it was a function that returned a yield. So that one's a little bit hierarchical, and then the operations is extremely hierarchical. Audrey is kind of and she's the director of operations, and with her staff under her, they've all been given roles that have kind of emerged as the system has grown, and someone needs to perform those roles. And so it's really, her task is more measuring the progress towards those roles and making sure that those functions have been performed well. Between Audrey and myself, I would say it's more collaborative, similar to Omeed's relationship with David. David's my co-founder, Omeed's the senior engineer. Similar to that relationship, if I were to pull the CTO card enough, Audrey would be discouraged. I'm sorry, if I were to pull the CEO card enough, Audrey would become discouraged and probably wouldn't do as good of a job. Most of the most recent initiatives within that department have come from her, and my role there is really just to bring some perspective into how adding people in different places affects the bottom line of the company, and with some guidance, we're able to figure out the right solution. But my role with Audrey, or my engagement with Audrey, has really been to get her to a point where, she can kind of make those decisions on her own. And there's some decisions that she still, seeks my counsel on. And anything new, we definitely talk about it. But she's pretty autonomous at this point.
Okay. So that's good to know. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about how flexible or rigid the structure is within your team as you go through the course of a day together. One example of this flexibility or rigidity is the Navy SEALs. So within the SEALs, there's a clear chain of command when they're on a mission, and then when they come back to base to debrief, they take the stripes off their uniforms at the door and have a very flat discussion. Then they put the straps back on and go back to work. So I'd like for you to think of examples like this on your team, where the team flexes between being flat or hierarchical, whether it's intentional or more informally fluid. So can you think of a recent example where your team has changed in structure like this?
A time where the team has changed in structure. So, between hierarchical and, I can describe something that happened earlier this morning. Ameed's our first, full-time engineering employee. And he's worked at bigger companies than us before, and we're considering hiring another engineer, and we wanted to kind of put together a time-off policy that works for everybody. And so we originally, we're planning on just kind of creating a policy and sharing it with Omeed. But after further consideration, we kind of thought, we should get his input on this. And so that's kind of what we did. If you were to ask Omeed how much of his input went into it, I wonder what he would tell you. Thinking on it though, his input dramatically shaped the outcome of the policy, adding two other kind of types of dates that we hadn't thought about. But it certainly wasn't a change in structure. It was kind of like a flat structure, maintaining a flat structure. I'm trying to think with Audrey, with the operators, if there's ever really been a change. And Well, I don't think that there has been. It is primarily hierarchical. Though, on once a week, we'll do a call kind of with Audrey and her supervisors and her team managers, and whom we call team leads, and get their feedback on how the organization is kind of shaping up to be. And most of the changes that have happened in the last year have really come from their feedback. Of course, it's up to us to decide if we're going to implement it or not. So I guess that does kind of maintain a more rigid structure, but I think that we are pretty good about listening and trying to incorporate feedback as fast as we can.
Okay. So, can you think of a time when you stepped up and maybe behaved even more hierarchically than normal?
Well, you mean kind of where I pulled the CEO card and just made that decision?
Yeah.
No. So David and I, early on in our business partnership, we also lived together. We originally started the company both as kind of co-founders, and then the role of CEO and CTO emerged. But for 6 months, we really consulted each other on everything. Then when those roles kind of were more well-defined, there would be arguments, and one of us might say well, we're just going to do it this way, and then that never really worked. It was always I always felt that, and so at least between David and I, now we almost universally have to be in agreement for us to make a decision on something, and we'll argue. We can argue for days on something, but if we're unable to convince the other person that our argument is correct, what will most often happen, in fact, is that we'll find the holes in the other person's argument and how, but also which parts are good, and the holes in our argument, or my argument, and which parts are good, and then those will combine together to make a nice hybrid. So I guess I'm saying is that kind of set the tone. Now it's very rare that we would kind of just pull the card, even on people that report to us. But there are times. Maybe a year or so ago, Audrey was considering letting someone go, and we hadn't really had the opportunity. This was kind of early on when she was still assuming her role as director, and we're pretty careful about letting people go because it has wide sweeping ramifications, and for us and for them. And so I kind of had, when I was in Audrey's role, I kind of had a pretty high bar for I had a pretty high bar for what I would consider evidence or a process to let someone go. And Audrey didn't really understand. And she was maybe more aggressively trying to get rid of someone that she felt was bad for the company and the team. And there was one or two times where I would explain my positions. She wouldn't understand. Or not understand. She would understand my position, but she would disagree. And she really still wanted to let this person go. And I kind of said, well, I can sign off on this if we can get A, B, and C more degrees of evidence. And that was frustrating, for her. And, but she complied. And, ultimately now she's much stricter than I am when it comes to letting people go. So it worked out. But then there's also been, more recently, maybe the issue of raises came up. And, raises for, individual members of the operations team. And